Another nice dark morning for Conservation Commission. All right. So first item, order of business is public comment. Any public comment for today?
Morning. I don't have any public comments.
Okay. Thanks, Reed. I will share, I guess this is more of an update. But Reed, I'll say that Reed Carr and I joined the select board meeting in person last night, and Terry logged in, and we spoke a bit about the Environmental Reserve Fund. But for the public comment part, I'll just say that it was nice to hear from Nick Warner and the crew at Winooski Valley Park District, and Reed Willis, about some of the updates and their budget proposal through from what they presented to the select board last night. And maybe we can get Simon, maybe we can get Nick in here sometime to talk a bit about their budget proposal to the select board. All right, so next up would be minutes from December 21st. Thank you, Simon. Any comments or suggested edits to the minutes? I'll start off, since it's right there on the screen. I think Christine needs an E at the end of her name and others present. Is that correct, Simon?
Yeah.
And while you're pointing that out, I think right on number 5, but it's the very last paragraph on number 5. Should that be Eric with a C? Because that's Eric.
Yeah, I was just looking at that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Good observation, Terry. I missed that one. Since we're in there, fourth line in on that paragraph. So MS4 is municipal separate storm sewer system. There's 4 S's instead of MS4. So municipal separate storm system, sewer system.
Okay.
Then on number 7, right there in the 3rd paragraph, I think it just the grow. I think it's grow, should grow.
Okay.
Yeah, right there, right before my name.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really the tiny little.
I'll move approval of the minutes as amended.
I'll second.
Thank you, Reed. Thanks, Laura. Any comments or discussion rather on the motion? All right, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed? And any abstentions? All right, thanks everyone. Simon, not bad for a guy with COVID. Nice job.
I think I did them before COVID, so I've got no excuse for those typos.
And it looks like our newest member is here.
Yeah.
Yes, I was just going to welcome David. David, welcome to the Conservation Commission, and thanks for joining us on this bright, sunshiny day.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
You guys start really early.
We like to get the hard stuff out of the way.
Yeah, David learned right after he was appointed last night. He learned that we meet at 7 a.m. and not 7 p.m.
I think I said, you mean that's not a typo?
Yes.
No one's ever accused me of being a morning person, but that's probably a good thing because it means that I've never had any parental responsibilities in the morning because I'm usually the last one up. And so I usually take all the afternoon responsibilities. So. Thanks for having me, guys.
Welcome.
Thanks for getting up early and joining us. I know it was a bit of a surprise when I shared that news with you I did give you a reprieve for one meeting, so
Yeah.
appreciate you joining
Yeah.
us today.
No, I looked at the agenda and I think it was an interesting one, so I wanted to jump right in.
All right. I think it'd be good to take we were missing at least one member anyway, but I think it'd be good to take a minute and introduce ourselves anyway.
Thank you.
I think we're, I don't know, maybe a bit ahead of schedule, but anyway, so I am, again, welcome, David. I'm Eric Howe. I'm the chair of the Conservation Commission, and I've been on the commission for 13 or 14 years now, something like that. My background and professional background and interests on the Conservation Commission are in the areas of water quality and watershed management. By day, I spend my days working on Lake Champlain and water quality issues for Lake Champlain. And I'll turn it over to Reed, who's our vice chair. Go ahead, Reed.
Hey, David. Reed Carr here. I live right in the village by the police station, and I grew up here, born here in Williston, and my background is environmental chemistry in college, and then I realized I didn't take any biology or ecology or field studies, so then I decided to do the land stewardship internship through UVM, and started to get involved a little bit more with invasive plants and insects, and then I went off to do all sorts of things not related to conservation or environmentalism. And so when I came back to Vermont from Washington, D.C., I decided that I would do some service. So that's me.
Thanks, Reed. Terry, you're next up in the rotation of my screen. Want to introduce yourself?
Okay, so I'm Terry Marin, and I've met you before, David. And so I was one of the newest members until you came. So I've just been on for like 2 years. And I don't have any background. I was a postmaster and a farmer. So I enjoy the outdoors and, hiking and getting out. And I am the person on the Catamount Community Forest Committee for the Conservation Commission.
Cool.
I think you're underselling yourself, Terry. You have a very supportive background, and I think you bring a lot to the commission, especially in the area of songbirds and that's kind of what I think of as in my head is your perspective is bird habitat and
Right.
Land conservation. All right, thanks, Terry. Kim, you're up next.
Good morning, David. I'm Kim Coleman. I live on Lefebvre Lane. I've been on the commission for maybe 7 years. I think Eric roped me in almost immediately after I moved to Williston. My, area of expertise is landscape level forestry. I'm professor in the Center for Earth and Environmental Science at SUNY Plattsburgh across the lake. I ferry commute. And I'm also an avid cyclist, and so I have an interest in the growth of mountain biking and getting people outside and into the woods.
Cool.
Thank you, Kim. And Laura?
Hi, David. Welcome. I'm Laura Meyer, and I've lived in Williston about 31 years, and I'm involved with the Vermont Master Naturalists. And Terry also is a Vermont Master Naturalist. My background is in invertebrate zoology, but with the Vermont Master Naturalist knowledge, I know a little bit about a lot of things. So that's about it.
Thanks, Laura.
Great.
And then Simon is our town conservation planner who's been working with us for, is it only 6 months, 7 months? Feels like a lot longer than that.
About 6 months.
Seems like so long, Simon.
Yeah.
It does. But you've been with the town for a few years anyway, right?
Probably about 18 months, I think. So I had another role here in the planning department before then. and then this opportunity came up. The previous conservation planner is still here. She's just moved on to work in energy and community development. So I've been working with you guys for about 6 months.
Yeah, Melinda got tired of us, so we got Simon.
Yep.
I was just gonna say, I think that was Melinda, right? Yeah.
Yep. And then the other person on the call is Reed Willis, who's not officially a member of the Conservation Commission, but she logs in just about every meeting to keep tabs on us, and she also serves as the town representative to the on the board for the Winooski Valley Park District. So Reed,
Yeah,
if
I
you're
stuck around
with
for
us,
that
you're
part of the
welcome to
meeting yesterday.
log in and wave hello. And that brings it, and so we are missing one other person, Gary Hawley, who's been on the commission longer than I have. So I don't know, probably something like 20 years. And he's a lecturer at UVM in the area of forestry.
Cool.
And that's the group.
Emeritus now.
What's that?
He's emeritus now.
He is?
Really?
I didn't realize
Yeah.
that. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
All right.
I aspire to being emeritus.
Well, thank you
Good
for
for
the
him.
introductions, everyone. That's a great set of background. You know, I come to this through a little bit of a different perspective. I went to Wesleyan University, Columbia. I worked at my training was more on the environmental science and policy side of things. My first job out of undergrad was a community organizer for the Sierra Club, and I was organizing communities in California and student groups for protection of public lands and wilderness areas around the country. And I worked in California for about 5 years and really got to know that state and land protection issues in that state. But it was really just scratching the surface on a state like California with such a deep history of public land protection and environmentalism. But that's kind of what sent me to grad school, where I then really became focused on climate change and energy use and greenhouse gas mitigation. And I ended up, so my master's is in public administration and with a focus on environmental science and policy again. And I ended up working at the utility in New York for about 10 years, working on greenhouse gas inventories and conservation issues, and ultimately had an opportunity to move up to Vermont, and where I am now I'm now the director of regulatory and state agency affairs for Efficiency Vermont, and I oversee all of Efficiency Vermont's regulatory matters in Montpelier and our interface with state agencies. So I'm firmly on the energy side, and conservation and public lands protection is really just a passion of mine. And so it's really, that's really thrilling to sort of hear how many professionals that actually work on this are in this committee. And so I hope that my perspective will be probably a less technical one, but still coming from a place of, you know, thinking about how Williston residents can access and enjoy the great public lands. And Kim, I'm an avid cycler as well. I do a lot of road cycling, and so one of the issues I was working on over the last few years was on the town map, and I led the little village or community subcommittee group that put all of that together. And we have a town map now with lots of multi-use lanes, with the idea of connectivity between the downtown and the rural areas. And Kim, I don't know if you know Hans, but Hans is in my, yeah, everybody knows Hans.
Yeah.
It's on the Catamount Forest Committee as well, I think. At least that was a year or two ago. And he was really helpful in that committee in bringing together concepts of connectivity of those trails, and, you know, bringing the Williston trails into connection with Richmond and all of the surrounding areas. So yeah, I'm just really excited to be here. The hour is early, but it's great to meet y'all.
Awesome. Well, that sounds like a good perspective to bring to the Conservation Commission, and a good background. So thanks, and thanks again for your interest in working with us, David.
Happy to be here.
All right. Okay, so now our next agenda item is Environmental Reserve Fund outreach and the budget. So as I mentioned, Reed and I and Terry joined the select board meeting last night and spoke during the public hearing portion of their agenda. For me, I spoke as the chair of the Conservation Commission and basically touched on several of the notes or paragraphs that we had in our memo that we submitted to the select board. At least I think it went to the select board. Did it actually make it to the select board?
Well, I definitely sent it to Eric, and he said he would send it to
I believe it was in the
Okay.
packet last night. Yeah.
Okay, good. So I just, I highlighted that talked about, actually, so when I walked in as they were, for lack of a better word, interviewing David for his seat on the commission, Jeff Ferris asked David how much he felt, how much land he felt would be appropriate to be conserved. And I have to confess, David, I didn't actually hear your answer because I was trying to get my self settled into a chair, but I did note the question. And so I kind of let off with that, talking about the 30 by 30 initiative and the White House executive order around that, and then moved on to pointing out that conservation easements are, and the ERF as part of that is our kind of our strongest tool for protecting land, and noting that bylaws and zoning can be changed. Talked about how we have now about 12 to 15% or so maybe of the land and the total land area in Williston is conserved. 6,000 acres would be a goal to shoot for if we wanted to hit 30%. Reviewed the conservation, the prioritization map that we developed a couple of years ago. Talked about form-based code and how that's the town's approach to creating an urban center here in town, but and driving development towards that area, towards Taft's Corners. But the other part of that coin is you also need to conserve the rural areas to protect them from suburban development. And then I kind of closed out by reviewing our 3 recommendations to the select board that were in our memo to them, which were to designate $100,000 in FY24 to the ERF to reflect the increase in property values that we've seen, and they had already just referenced in their review of the budget, so that was convenient. And to explain that we are looking for to establish and maintain a balance of $800,000 in the ERF, and then look for a plan from them to dedicate $100,000 annually to the ERF until that target balance is achieved. So those are basically my comments. It was the public hearing portion, so there wasn't any discussion back and forth or anything like that. They heard my comments and then moved on. And I think Reed and then Terry spoke up and shared a few comments as well, which if you guys want to do that, go ahead.
I just spoke really from the perspective of as a resident, because I didn't want to repeat what Eric covered, which was a lot of the Conservation Commission outlook. But I just highlighted that there's a really intense conversation about the rate and impact of development in Williston going on, not just now, but over the last few years. And that I tried to make the connection for the select board as to why I think that's happening. And I think it's the fact that there's a lot of urgency on the development side to acquire land and develop land because there's only so many suitable locations in town, and there's a lot of competition for those for the allocations to do that, and there's not seemingly the same urgency to act to conserve important spaces, open spaces in town. So I just shared that perspective as why I think it's driving a lot of the gut reaction around town. And Terry, if you want to say anything, I think that pretty much covers. Oh, and then I also at the very end just stood back up and made one more comment, wanting to highlight that we had just now, we're interested in the conservation potential of things like the Glazer parcel, but of course, we also heard last meeting from just a concerned citizen who wants to find a pathway to conservation for their property up on Old Creamery, and they're not alone in that part of town. So I just shared that we currently have opportunities to work with the public to conserve things, but we have no budget. So we really need to rectify that.
Yeah, and it was great to have so many people. There was another gentleman that spoke before I did, and I just kind of highlighted about the work that the conservation had done in 2020 with Melinda and Jens about the significant wildlife habitat areas, and talked about the comments that in 2020, I guess it was, when the town had put out a survey to ask residents what they thought about development in town, and it was around the Glazer parcel, and they ended up with 70 pages. And I said, not comments, 70 pages of comments about people just saying that the development was, it was too much, and people were overwhelmed, and all to do with traffic and schools and everything that goes along with that. And that we really needed the tool of the funding of the ERF to be able to, fulfill our duties as a committee in the town. So I just kind of reiterated, but Eric, your talk was great. I think that really was helped a lot.
Thanks, Terry. Yeah, like I said, I was just reviewing the points from our memo, but long and short of it was that they heard us, and Terry McCaig anyway seemed to want to advocate for restoring funding to the ERF. 3 of the 4 select board members were there. Jeff and Greta seemed to support it, but didn't really voice any opinions one way or the other, I guess. At least that was my takeaway. But Terry was interested in at least supporting the ERF at the level of $75,000, and asked Eric Wells to find some ways to work that into the budget, well, along with a couple of other things that they also were considering last night. So we'll see where that goes. I think I might continue to attend the budget meetings as they work through these discussions over the next couple of weeks, meetings, I guess, not months, but next couple of their meetings.
I think the next hard part, Eric, is going to be, when they actually see what they're going to have to do in order to. It's easy at that meeting to say, "I hear you. Let's see how we can fund it," and then it's a lot harder when they see the impact on the revenue side of that expenditure. Right. So,
yeah, and that's why I think I might continue to attend these. And, I don't really have a good feel for the select board and how much they actually engage the audience in these discussions if they're not in a public hearing. If I do attend as the chair of the Conservation Commission, would they actually, and this topic comes up, would they reach out to me in the audience and ask me questions? I don't know if they would do that or not. But,
could you just let Eric Wells know that you're going to be going and to hold space within the discussion for you to make a couple comments? I don't know if that's appropriate. Oh, Ken is here. And has
I can reach out to Eric. I guess that's a good point, Kim. I can and just let him know that I'm planning to attend and happy to answer questions if the select board has them. At this point, I don't know. I don't know what else I would offer to them other than short of repeating what I said last night. But yeah, I can at least. Right, that's a good point. I can reach out to Eric. And let him know that
it's probably going to be along the lines, Eric, of I know it's going to be hard to justify to taxpayers that this is what we're spending our money on, but we're telling you that you need to spend the money on this. There's no staff member, there's no staff budget, department budget to advocate for it. So I'm here to advocate for it.
Yeah.
What were some of the ideas they were kind of kicking around were the ARPA funds that are coming. And then there, that they could possibly look at other budgets and pull from there. And then there's money each year that is left over that was things come under budget and it gets put into a fund, and that could be used maybe to fund the ERF. Yep.
Yeah, that still impacts tax rate though, because that money was partially being used to reduce the tax increase. So even if we pull from, anyway, I don't want to get into it, but yeah, it's going to be tricky to do it in any way that doesn't impact taxpayers.
Yeah, exactly. But that's that's one of the points I kind of made last night is that this is shouldn't be considered as an addition to the town's budget. It's, it should be part of the town budget and not something that could just be it's not the first apple you can reach up off the tree to pluck off to reduce the size of the budget. Ken, thanks for joining us. I see you have your hand up.
Yes, good morning. I did want to offer a comment in response to the question. I'm changing hats. Just imagine that I still work for the town in some way. You take my comments for what they're worth. My comment had to do with the select board, and would the select board entertain commentary from the public, if it's not a public hearing. My experience has always been that they try to run those meetings informally, and if somebody shows up and wants to speak, they're going to let you speak. And I think especially in the case where somebody is representing a town appointed board, they will be especially attentive. And, in the past, certainly when I was working for the town, when it came to questions regarding the ERF in particular, but just in general, when there's been somebody there from the Conservation Commission, it carries additional weight. Even if you're just saying the same thing that Simon might say, or Melinda, or whether it was me or Matt or whoever that might be, it carries additional weight when it comes from you. And so I would never lose sight of that, and understand that when you show up and if you speak directly on point, and especially if the whole board has said this is our opinion, this is our voice, they're going to listen to that. I also think that my experience has been that all the boards are always listening to the commentary from the public, whether it's you folks or the select board or the planning commission. I was at the planning commission last night. Everybody's listening to that. And my feeling is the select board understands full well the power of the ERF fund. The willingness to put money in there kind of waxes and wanes with other pressures on the budget, as always the case. But I would certainly encourage you to show up and to speak, and to not be afraid to speak with a direct voice. I've seen some examples where when a committee is together as the committee and they're speaking, and there's a certain level of oomph behind the words, and then they go in front of the select board and people tend to be a little bit more tentative. I would encourage you to just, to say what it is that you want to say. So anyway, that was my comment, a little bit off the topic from why I'm here today, but I just offer that as a friend of the board.
Thank you, Ken. And yeah, I realize you're probably here for our next agenda item, but I do appreciate your advice as our former town planner. And I didn't want to put you on, I thought about asking you, but I didn't want to put you on the spot. So thanks for raising your hand and sharing your thoughts and experience on that.
Well,
on that
as
point.
Eric, as anybody who knows me knows, if given the opportunity to speak, I will gladly reach for it. So,
all right. Well, thanks, Ken. That's a good point, and I will reach out to Eric and let him know that I'll be available at the upcoming meeting, budget meetings.
Eric, could I add one thing on this topic if you're thinking of maybe moving on? And that's just
okay.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No.
No, we still have a few more minutes till we move on to the Glacier plan. I wanted to talk a bit about an article in the Observer.
Yeah, go ahead and talk about that first, and then I want to talk about my idea for a public outreach event partnering with Sustainable Williston. So go ahead.
Oh, okay. So just quickly, last meeting we talked a bit about how to promote the ERF to folks in the town. I imagine there's a lot of people in town who aren't even aware of the ERF as a tool or what it does, or perhaps more importantly, how it's funded. So many of you may have seen the note that I dropped into Front Porch Forum the other day ahead of the meeting last night, which was largely pulled from our memo to the select board. We also talked about last time, I think, about submitting something to the Observer, and short of just resubmitting this memo that we sent to the select board, publishing that or asking the Observer to publish that, I could take some time and turn that into something that might be more easily interpreted in the Observer, to reach more folks who might not be on Front Porch Forum, and be happy to draft something up like that and share it around.
I think
that's a good idea.
Yeah, I do too. I did reach out to Jason Starr, I think that is, and just asked him, I saw the article about the budget and all, and I said, there was no mention of the ERF not being funded. And I said, do you think you're going to follow up on that? And he said, no. He said, you could write a letter to the editor.
Excellent.
So I said, okay. Just a heads up.
All right. We'll draft it as a letter to the editor then.
They also do one issue per month has the green living section. So, there might be more room, more real estate in that issue. Just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
All right. Yeah, I can look into that too when that section is published.
And Eric, I'm happy to assist with writing something for the Observer. Eric, if you want a wingman for reviewing things or coming up with ideas.
Okay. Thanks, Reed. Ken, did you have something, another point, or?
I was just gonna say that I have a lot of stock text that's the importance of public forested land in 3 sentences, if it's helpful.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Like the intro to papers that I recycle and reword.
Lectures and
yeah.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. Thanks, Kim. So then Reed, you had a thought on a public event or outreach in partnership with Sustainable Williston.
Yeah, so there was a kind of a planning. So I just wanted to say one thing about Sustainable Williston, because I think sometimes folks think of Sustainable Williston as a established and formally run organization. It's really probably between 10 and 20 people that are Williston residents who want to see sustainability emphasized, whether it's through town action or just community members doing things, and it's organized around community resiliency, not just necessarily climate change and things like that, but also, what are we doing to support every person being able to live in Williston regardless of their economic status, how do we make sure that people have their basic needs met, basically, including social needs? So it has kind of a broad charter, and it is not, we have no formal leader, we have no budget. We just kind of try to identify things that would be good for the town that are not already being served. And one of the things that's happened recently is with the advent of the Energy Committee, some of the topics that Sustainable Williston has focused on now has some formal representation with the town. And we now have Melinda helping work on some of those initiatives. And so while Sustainable Williston is going to continue to support those things and assist with those things, we don't have to be the driving force behind some of them. And for example, we used to do the EV show and tell events, public outreach events. Now that's something that can be coordinated through the Energy Committee. So we have traditionally done what I would call like community forum type events, where we pick a topic, we try to find some experts on it, and we try to put together an event where the public can just come out and learn about it. Not just a presentation, but also often like some Q&A and some conversation with some experts. And it just seems like this might be a good topic to try to coordinate an event on. So the idea, I wrote a little note to Sustainable Williston, and what I said about it was thinking long term, it would be interesting to present or either present myself or get a co-presenter for an education style event to go through the ERF history, its impact, how it's funded, to your point, Eric, and the prioritization map that the WCC uses to decide when it's appropriate to advise the select board to use the ERF. We already have so many great materials that have been put together, so we don't really need to necessarily develop something to present. We already have story map materials that could just be put up on a screen, and we can walk through them and take questions. If we were able to bring in other expertise, for instance, if somebody like Jens was willing to attend and help answer questions about, why are forest blocks so important? Why did we develop our current prioritization and our SWHA updates around this forest block priority and stuff? That could also add another perspective, and then we would be able to just kind of get more interest from the public and a better understanding from the public about the ERF and how it all works and how it fits into conserving open spaces that are important to people in town. So that was my idea. And so I guess my ask to the commission was just, are you supportive of this idea? Does it seem like the right time, the right topic, the right thing to do? Does it seem like the right thing to partner with Sustainable Williston on, in terms of Sustainable Williston would be able to provide some help with public outreach to advertise the event, to find space for the event, and to kind of play host to people arriving at the event. And also secondarily, if you are in support, is there anybody who's interested in presenting or presenting with me, or any suggestions, such as my idea that, of asking Jens, hey, would you be interested in being part of an event like this? So that's a lot of questions, but let me know what you think.
Thanks, Reed. I think that's a great idea. If you and the Sustainable Williston group are able to put it together in the next month or so, it sounds a little bit ambitious, but maybe you can do it.
My intent wasn't to do it for this budget cycle. To your point, Eric, it's kind of late for this budget cycle. But my thought was, it's the type of thing that would be good to do, and maybe the action item or the takeaway for people who attend it is to pay attention to the budget next year, mm-hmm. and help advocate to make sure that we're funding that appropriately. And then also, if you want to do something about conservation in Williston, inquiring, and I don't know what the right avenue is, but inquiring about how to provide input on that aspect in the next town plan might be kind of the next major activity that somebody could partake in.
Okay, that sounds reasonable, and I'd be happy to help you put together something just to share points on what the ERF is and how it's funded. For external speakers to bring in to talk about the importance of conserved lands, that Jens was definitely the first person that came to my mind. The second person, very close second, would be Kate Warner, who from the Trust for Public Land, who helped orchestrate the Catamount project. And then a third, I don't have anybody in particular, but someone from Vermont Land Trust might also be good to
Maybe like
to look
Bob
to.
Heiser. He's a
Ben. Is that
Bob
who?
Heiser.
Oh, Bob. Yes, Bob
Bob
Heiser.
Heiser.
Yep.
I love
Yep.
the idea of having someone from a land trust or the Trust for Public Land, because I think it's really important to like make the point that there's a threshold where those groups, below which those groups aren't interested in supporting conservation or in sort of like funding easements, but that like there are properties that without the ERF would fall through the cracks, right? That like, in case there's a perception that like, well, land trusts exist and they'll do the conservation. Look what happened with Catamount.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a great idea, because I think I would even learn, I think, a lot from a conversation about that.
When does the town start working on the new town plan for 2024? Do they start fairly soon, or?
It is this year. I think the Planning Commission have made their decision to proceed with the Glazer. I think its next agenda is mapping out the timetable for doing the next town plan. But I think the objective is to get it out to the select board next year.
It's March 2025 town meeting. Isn't that where the town plan will be voted on? Or is that?
I think
I think it's 24.
Okay, March 2024, and it goes. It's. I thought it was the 2025 town plan, so I was trying to figure out how it was named.
It's now an 8-year span instead of a 5-year. Is that what happened?
Correct. Yeah.
But let's look to our former town planner who might be able to answer that question, and then as a courtesy to him, we'll transition into the Glazer agenda item.
Sure. Well, again, as a friend of the town, so the way we named the town plan in the past was to take the ending date and use that as the target that we're looking forward to it. So that was the nomenclature that was used in terms of determining the dates. And it is an 8-year cycle now. It used to be a 5-year, what's required under Vermont state law. It was changed to 8 years. When I was actually working for the town, I had advocated to change it to 10 years with requiring a 20-year plan that you would renew every 10 years. And interestingly enough, in Vermont state law, there's nothing in the enabling legislation for town plans that says the town plan should have a long-term focus, which is kind of weird, because that's the way you should do it. You should be looking forward long-term, not just next year or 2 years, 5 years, 8 years, whatever. You should be looking long-term and then have a focus on what you're going to try to do within the shorter term horizon. But and then unless something has changed in the town charter, Williston is not a town where the town plan has to go in front of the voters.
So it's just select board.
Right. So
approval.
it has to come out of the planning commission, and then it goes to the select board, And then, of course, it also has to be approved by the Regional Planning Commission after the fact. But in some towns, I think either Jericho or Underhill is one of them, and a few others where it requires a vote of the people. Williston, it only requires approval by the select board. So it would travel ostensibly on a different timeline than town meeting day and that
Okay,
sort of thing.
Thanks
So
for that.
Yeah, anyway.
Yep. So what I hear, Eric, is I don't hear any opposition. Sounds like people are interested in me continuing to pursue this.
I think so. Yeah.
Thank
thanks,
you, Reed.
All right, Simon, I'll communicate with you. I'm going to try to reach out to some of those folks and just gauge interest in being a guest speaker or a partner for the event.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Simon, perhaps we can put this back on a future meeting agenda. If not next time, then whenever, I guess our February meeting, that would be to review where we're at. All right. So Glazer specific planning commission debrief. Simon, do you want to kick this one off?
Yeah, so the Planning Commission has had a series of meetings about this, and then just before Christmas they decided, in quite an exciting Planning Commission vote actually, to move it on to the next stage. So if anyone hasn't watched it, it's probably worth watching, just to see what the Planning Commission members said and what their individual perspectives are from that meeting.
I did. I watched it last night. The last whatever it was, 20 minutes or half hour or something, and it was very interesting watching the conversation between among the Planning Commission members.
Yeah. So I think you probably all know roughly what a specific plan is, but it's a development proposal for a particular parcel of land that's sort of developed through amending the bylaws and the town plan. And one of the things they have to do is provide a substantial benefit to the community for the town that sort of furthers the goals of the town plan. So there's quite a lot of discussion about what that substantial benefit should be, and eventually it sort of resulted in the Planning Commission being satisfied that one could arise. So they've taken the next step, which is to move on to forming the Citizen Advisory Committee, providing them with a charge, what they're supposed to be working through to deliver this specific plan, and giving them a deadline under which to report back. So last night, the meeting that I think Ken attended, along with Emily and Matt and the Planning Commission, was to formalise that charge. And sort of the prime reason for that is to give the committee a clear steer on what the Planning Commission is expecting them to investigate as part of the specific plan, and what actions they need to take to sort of deliver a substantial benefit. And I think the feeling is that everyone does better in this situation if there's a clear steer from the very outset about what's expected of them. They also appointed the advisory committee, so that's more or less established now, sort of to allow them to move on to start discussing the issue with Ken and the applicant.
Sorry to interrupt, Simon, is that the one that Gary is serving on behalf of the Conservation Commission?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So Gary's going to be on the committee representing the Conservation Commission, along with I think 3 members of the public, 2 from the affected neighbourhoods nearby, and 1 from the community at large. Lisa Braden Harder, I think, who has been active in sort of equity and housing discussions. So that's where we are. I don't know whether, like, how much time people want to spend on this, whether you want to have a look through the charge to figure out what is expected of the applicant. Ken, I don't know if you have anything to add to that. summary? I suspect you probably do.
You've already learned my traits there, Simon. Simon's provided a really good, accurate summary of events that have transpired so far. I mean, the one thing that I would add to it is that the specific plan as it was originally proposed from the applicant perspective was really focused primarily on the open space. And I think suffice it to say that based on the discussions in the community meetings, as well as this discussion last night, what has come from the Planning Commission has been really a lot more than that at this point. And so, they're looking for a number of things to be addressed in the plan that go beyond sort of the open space portion, and in particular the view shed, which was what our initial offering was focused on. The view shed there from Mountain View Road. It's really moved beyond that, and so there will be a key question going forward from the applicant's side. Understanding I'm the representative, I'm not the applicant. There will need to be conversations with the applicant in terms of what's going to be realistic from their point of view, and incorporating as many of these various aspects into the plan as possible. So, I mean, that's a key question, and I don't know what the answer to that is. I think it's fair to say that is the question of the day, and we'll have to see going forward. The Planning Commission did establish a deadline of June the 6th, which I think is very short. And sometimes deadlines can have a positive effect of getting people to fish or cut bait and stay focused. I would hope that would be the case. But it does seem like it's very short, and you're putting together a committee of people who haven't worked together as a committee, and you all are on a committee, so some of the challenges of working together as a committee. But for a brand new committee, they're going to have to work through some of those dynamics, and whatever the case may be. But so I mean, the one other thing I would add in terms of the vote a few weeks ago at the Planning Commission, I would characterize it as the most dramatic vote by a board that I have ever participated in. And so, and then of course, from where I sit as representing the applicant, the drama was felt very, very acutely. But that's, I just wanted to be here as much as anything today to answer any questions that you might have. And so.
Nice to have some closure of some sort on the on that step in the process.
Yes, well, as one of the reporters who talked to me said, as I understand it, no means no, and yes means maybe. So that's where we are. We're at maybe. It's better.
Sounds like a good summary. Yeah,
it's better than no.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. And June 6th does sound like an ambitious timeline or deadline. But I imagine that it's if it's a planning commission deadline, it's probably perhaps not a hard deadline, but maybe something that can be moved if needed, or extended anyway. Okay, so other questions or comments on the Glazer plan? So I guess my question is, in this next step of the process, are there specific touch points for the Conservation Commission, or will that be mostly through Gary as the Conservation Commission's representative to this committee?
So I think they are.
I was just saying, from my perspective, I would say that I think I would use Gary as your representative of your points of advocacy from the perspective of the Conservation Commission. Understanding, as I sort of said earlier, that there are other things that the Planning Commission has said they want to have included as part of the plan that go beyond the open space portion. that said, there are some key things that will need to get worked out relative to the open space. In particular, there was a long discussion last night about the windswept farm and just what, how that would work out. The applicant, the Glazers are proposing to donate the property to the town, and then potentially for there to be some sort of a lease agreement with the Mouses to continue to operate Windswept Farm. But there are some details in that the commission's got to work through. But there are some other things too, as in terms of potentially path trail connections, some of the things that normally sit in your court, in addition to the view shed. I think the view shed part is probably the easiest part in terms of open space sort of things. But so I think those would be things, I think, for the Conservation Commission that you probably want to be paying close attention to, and an opportunity to have some advocacy around those issues.
Thanks, Ken. Terry?
So I think it would be great to, talk with Gary maybe before the first meeting on the committee that he's going to be at, and kind of get a feel for what some of the Conservation Commission members as a whole, are thinking about for this particular project. Because I don't think we've really talked about, we didn't talk about the specifics, and it would be great to, have a conversation with Gary so he can bring that to the committee.
Yeah, my suggestion was going to be to ask that we have an agenda item for Gary to share his perspective on the charge at the next meeting, and have a brief discussion about, just to help guide Gary, so he can come in with some ideas about perspectives across the commission.
Yeah, I was thinking the same. Simon, I don't know if you've drafted the agenda for our next meeting yet, but can we make some time on that next agenda, and I guess confirm that Gary will be able to join us for that meeting?
We can, yeah.
Now, I heard at one time they had 19 people apply for a spot on that committee, and they were only taking 3 or 4. Have they interviewed those people? Have they picked them? When's the first meeting of this committee?
They have picked the people. So as well as Lisa, who's the at-large member, there was I think Ruben Escopiso, who I think lives across the road, and I think is not unknown to people who frequent Front Porch Forum. And then there's a chap called
Kyle Sala.
Yeah.
And then Alex from the Planning Commission as well.
Yep.
And then there was a discussion about who the DRB representative might be. I think that, as I understand it, the DRB had recommended Scott Riley, and there was discussion last night as to whether or not, how should I put it, that Scott might carry some baggage with him in the court of public opinion that might weigh negatively on his participation. Obviously, from the perspective of the applicant, we would like there not to be negative baggage that comes along with any representative, although, so there was a lot of discussion about that. So it could be Scott from the DRB, but it could be somebody else. And that's, I was just looking at my notes from last night. I think that's it.
Okay, thanks, Ken.
Hey everyone, I gotta run to this next grad committee meeting with my very helpful one. See you all.
All right, good luck, Kim. Thanks.
Bye.
See you, Kim.
Stop touching me.
How fitting. Bye.
Bye.
Oh boy. All right. Okay, so other questions on the Glazer specific plan and the next steps and process. We'll try to fit something in on the next meeting agenda with Gary if we can, and we can chat more about it then too. All right. I guess we can move on to staff update. And Ken, you're welcome to join us, but I see you waving goodbye. So thanks for logging in and answering some questions for us. All right. Okay, staff updates. First up is hybrid meetings from January 15th. You're going to try to get together back in person now that you've got your golden ticket, Simon?
It's more that the state legislature is forcing me by not renewing their online only mandate. So there will be an opportunity for people to attend in person at 7 a.m. At the office, should they so wish. Going forward now. So we'll set up the annex with the OWL so that people can still participate. Hybrids, people can still zoom in.
I'm telling you, if there's food, the commission will be there. From my experience.
Who's going to make the first muffins?
I'll talk to my wife.
Oh, there you go. I missed all that. I didn't think I ever was at too many where there was food.
That's right. Yeah. So I'm looking at. Am I looking at the right? So did I see January 15th on the agenda? Wouldn't it be the 18th?
It is the 18th.
Yeah, I think, Oh, from January 15th. Okay.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. All right. So yeah. So our next meeting is January 18th. I could probably make that one in person. I don't know. I have my own board meeting at 9:45 that day. So I don't know. We'll see if I can make it that one in person or if I have to do it remotely. But for those of you who have not had the privilege of Conservation Commission meetings in person, we do when we do get together, we usually have one member who contributes some calories and carbs for the members who are present. Muffins, scones, donuts, fruit, whatever. And at one point we had a rotation going, and I don't know if we can try to get a rotation to back put together again. That would be nice. But I think first we just need to make sure we can or find out who can get back together in person versus participating via Zoom. I think I've heard pretty clearly from Kim that it might be tough for her to log it or to participate in person because she has childcare duty on Wednesday mornings. But for me, it may actually be on a meeting or a week by week basis or meeting by meeting basis. So I don't know how regularly I could be in person, but it is great to do it in person when we can.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's something that if we feel that there's something on the agenda that would be particularly good to do an in-person discussion, we can decide the meeting before and figure out whether we can do it. It's certainly much more convenient for everyone, being able to zoom in from their own homes.
I like the idea.
Okay, so Simon, maybe you can just send out a poll to the group and find out who might be able to join in person, at least starting for next week anyway, and then we can look at upcoming schedules. Or next time, I guess, not next week. Thankfully, that got me nervous about my board meeting. Okay, so what was next on the updates? Moved off of that. Growth report.
Yes, so this is let me just share my screen. So within the budget documents, buried in there is a memo from the planning department, and the town manager asked Matt and Emily to look at what the projected growth in sort of new homes and new commercial is for the next 5 years. And I just wanted to pull it up because it's quite an interesting document that is sort of on like page 23 of the budget report. So I'm not convinced anyone's really going to find it in that location. And I wanted to make sure you guys had seen it. So it's a prediction of potential growth for the next 5 years. It's based on the sort of maximum realistic build out rates and demographic changes that could occur. So it's probably, I guess, depending on your point of view, it's either overly optimistic or overly pessimistic about how much change Williston could experience in the next 5 years. So takes a little bit of reading, but some of the key, facts that we've got here is that, we could grow to, 11,700 people in the next 5 years. That's 2.3% a year, which sort of exceeds the average rate over the last 10 years. But again, that is, based on the maximum potential rate. We're also experiencing a growth in commercial development. We, have up to 300,000 square feet of building footprint in the next 5 years. Something it highlights is the demographic change and how Williston is experiencing shrinking household sizes. So, we are expecting the average household size to decrease over the next 30 years, which means that our existing housing stock is going to hold fewer people. But one of the things that's actually starting to spur is construction of, new smaller homes. So you 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom homes, multifamily structures, things like that. And as well as happening in the growth centre, it's also starting to feed through into some of the more traditional Summerfield subdivisions like Summerfield, the Catamount Gulf, where they do have several 1-bed homes in that subdivision, which is very different from the likes of, South Ridge and Brenham Woods. Again, we do have the commercial development. It sits outside of growth management, so it's a little harder to quantify. One sort of metric that they came up with to look at, like, proportionally how much growth is experiencing in comparison to residential, is that the commercial development's expected to generate sort of 562 traffic trips over the next 5 years, and our residential development is sort of 600. So broadly speaking, about the same. It talks about growth management. You probably all know that, well, have a vague understanding of growth management because it is exceptionally complicated. We do have 80 units a year that are generally available, and that's split up between the growth centre, the sewer service area outside the growth centre, which is the RZD, and then the ARZD. And this table here has a lot going on, but this probably summarises why, for example, the Glazer proposal is coming forward in the way it is. So this column here on the right tells you at our upcoming growth management meeting in March how many units are being requested versus how many are available. So if you look at the outside the sewer service area, we've got 24 units available for every one that is being requested by an applicant. For the growth centre, it's almost 2 for every one that's being requested by the applicant. And then for the RZD, we have 1/5 of a unit for every one that's being requested by the applicant. So that RZD is extremely oversubscribed in the upcoming years because of a number of large subdivisions like, Catamount Gulf and Trinity Baptist Church. This map sort of shows you probably some of the best conservation that you can do, which is where new homes are located over the last 5 years.
I was just, to interrupt for a second, I was just going to say, this is a really nice map. I hadn't even thought to ask for a map like this one before to show where the new housing projects have been over the last 5 years. So this is really, really interesting to look at.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So you can see that 76% of the new dwellings were built in the growth centre, which are those large sort of house-shaped things in the red area, which is obviously great because that means they're not being built sort of in the ARZ or D or elsewhere. You can see the two sort of larger subdivisions that have been approved. So I think that's Northridge there and Creek's Edge there in the last five years. And then you can see a lot of like individual dots distributed and sprinkled around the ARZD. So that's really quite good sort of explanation about how some of Williston's sort of wider goals of focusing everything in the growth centre and trying to restrict stuff in the ARZD have paid off, even though I know there is still a lot of community angst about development. You know, there are some successes here as well. We do have this exceptionally complicated table here. Don't really want to go into this too much, but it sort of shows you some of the numbers that do make it up. So in comparison to like the maximum build out rate, you can see, for example, that this includes Glazer, which is obviously not permitted at the moment. It includes Trinity Baptist Church, which I guess I need to watch that video, may or may not be happening now, and sort of explains how that 718 new homes has been created.
Sorry, Simon, did I hear you say that the Trinity Baptist project may not be going forward?
Well, I think that's, maybe you weren't here, we were discussing it, something that was mentioned at the Winooski Valley Park District meeting that I need to watch back.
They said it was on hold.
Yeah, so we'll see what comes of that.
Okay.
And then we have,
I guess I heard Nick mention or reference that last night, but didn't quite catch or follow what he was saying with that. Okay.
And then we have the non-residential build out, and which is all in the growth centre and the industrial area. So you can see, you know, there's a lot of stuff happening on the Robert subdivision where U-Haul is now. There's a few more of those coming forward. Some more in Finney Crossing. And then, you know, the Aldi grocery store, which achieved its discretionary permit last year. You know, particularly interesting that if you look at this figure here, new PM peak hour vehicle trips, which is how we traditionally measure traffic generated. So 205 there for the Aldi grocery store. We got 0 letters and no one spoke at the DRB meeting about that particular application. We do get a lot of comments about residential trip generation.
I saw that. It was interesting, and I would just assume, this is just my perspective, is that all these is, you know, it has things, but I don't think it has everything. And I think people would, you know, they would go to Hannaford and they would go to Aldi's. So it's interesting that they project 205. You know, I think it's going to be, I don't think people go to Aldi's and do like all their shopping, but that's kind of my perspective. I've only been in one.
They're a unique grocery store, or maybe not that unique. I think Lidl is quite similar. And that's it really. So if you are interested in growth, I would definitely advise having a look at that. There's a lot of detail in it, but there's a lot of useful information there about projected growth.
Yeah, a lot of good data.
Yeah.
Collected from various sources.
Yeah, that was very interesting. A lot of work, I think, behind that little memo. Calling that a memo seems like it's not quite doing all of the effort behind that justice.
So I have a question.
I guess go ahead. What's that, Terry?
Oh, I just have a general question, and it's probably more for the planning board. You know, if you really look, and Matt Boulanger said this one time, is that if you really look at Taft's Corners, there's a lot that isn't built out. like that whole section near Home Depot, and there's just parcels, behind Hannaford's, and that just seems to sit idle where Cottonwood got built and Finney Crossing got built. And it's just curious why that sits empty and why that isn't being built out more. It just seems like things are spreading out rather than these being built on the interior of the growth center.
Yeah, I mean, I think we would like to see it build out quickly now, particularly if we've got form-based code, but in the end, it is landowner driven. And, hopefully once people start getting their heads around form-based code and what it can mean for their development parcels, we might see more of these coming forward. But I think, a lot of that land is owned by sort of one particular landowner who has a particular focus in the types of development they do, and they may be hopefully looking alternative types.
Is that like more box stores that their vision is, or?
So you can't really do in the form-based code area. You can't do box stores anymore.
Right.
It would need to be. It would probably be sort of residential above commercial if that's what they're looking to do.
And who owns those parcels? Is that Davis?
I think so. Yeah, a lot of them.
Yeah, Davis.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think on that map 1, which I do, it is very interesting to see that perspective. I guess a suggestion for a second map would be to just overlay everything on there onto a map with homes existing prior to 2015 to kind of see where, just to give that perspective of how are these new homes landing in the context of other prior existing developments in town.
And one thing that I've heard a couple times recently, since form-based code has been passed and it's now part of the town plan, is a lot of people were under the impression that the RZD and ARZD were going to be saved. Now that there was going to be all this growth, and that the growth now was going to be moved to the growth center and not spilling out over into these other zones, which really isn't true. They're still happening, and I think people were really surprised. They didn't understand that. They really thought that the town was going to kind of almost force a lot of that housing to be built there as opposed to ARZD. And I think that's a surprise to folks.
Yeah, I agree, Terry. That was, I think, one of the points I made to the select board last night in my comments too, is that's just just because they have this doesn't mean they're preventing development from happening, suburban development from happening elsewhere in town. All right, thanks for that review, Simon. Anything else on the growth center topic?
No, I think that was it. Yeah.
All right. And I managed to navigate away from the agenda. So you had one more bullet in the updates.
Yeah. So just a couple of other things, if you got a moment, just so I don't forget them. Is that we got an email yesterday from Vermont about the availability of watershed grants, sort of with the deadline of February to undertake projects that are watershed related, relating to sort of monitoring, education, sort of planning and assessment or implementation. So between $3,000 and $10,000 are available. I think it says, I had a look through the guidance yesterday, and I can send this on to everyone shortly, but they are emphasizing education and outreach on flood resiliency and measures to protect stream habitat. And I was just wondering if anyone wants to think about any potential projects that might be of interest to the Commission for pursuing under that grant.
I'd be happy to.
Yeah. So, hold on.
Can you send around that RFP?
Yeah. Will do.
With that, I have a question. Maybe this isn't even connected. I know Christine talked last time about the stormwater runoff and all that, and that the town has discontinued testing of the Allen Brook. And I remember when I first came on the Conservation Commission, it was a big thing that the town had been monitoring the Allen Brook for 12 years or something, and that the commission wanted to take that data and really turn it into something that had some, data that we could use. And, then all of a sudden it was gone and it wasn't happening anymore. And is that something that would fit into this, or they just, it's a dead no, they're actually not going to? Does that fit into this?
So I think that was that was a decision of the state not to say we're not interested in monitoring until the equilibrium reestablishes itself, which I guess is a decision.
And the equilibrium was the highs and the lows and the...
Well, I think they want like all their restoration projects that they planned out to sort of bed in and then find out whether they've worked is what I understood Christine to be saying there. So all the stream restoration and things like that, are these working before we start monitoring on a regular basis? I know that I looked back through previous grants yesterday afternoon, and I think Melinda did apply for that back in 2020 for the watershed grant to turn that data into something more meaningful to communicate to the public, but it wasn't successful in 2020.
Reed, did your dad did a lot with Sustainable Williston for the restoration of the banks and things on Allen Brook?
Yeah, Sustainable Williston had done in recent times maintenance of existing plantings and has begun doing some new plantings, but not necessarily with the data. I do know, just kind of related to this, that Chapin, my father, is currently mentoring an 8th grader who's doing a project on water quality in the Allen Brook at WCS. But I think the level of that project is not necessarily super data oriented. I think it's a little bit more on the things that impact water quality and what the town is doing about water quality in Allen Brook. But anyway, there is interest in the topic, but there's not a lot going on in terms of working with the data or installing new restoration projects right now.
Simon,
let me ask a qualify.
I'm
I'm sorry, I have a question. Just
sure, go ahead, David.
On the monitoring, are we monitoring, or I guess what was discontinued? Are you speaking of elevation of the water to monitor flood stages, or monitoring of water quality and like ability to support life?
Yep. So the program was it was measuring or monitoring a couple of different parameters, water quality parameters. So we were looking at phosphorus, total phosphorus, and then also E. coli, turbidity, and I think there was a fourth one. Chloride, maybe? I don't recall.
So,
but
not
it was water
hydrologic,
quality. Correct.
not hydrologic flood conditions or anything like that.
Correct. There is the U.S. Geological Survey does, I believe, still operates and maintains a gauge that measures the water level and probably the flow of the Allen Brook at the intersection of or where it crosses under 2A. I think I know there's a gauging station there, and there was one operated there historically, and it was shut down for a few years, and I think it was restored.
And Christine was showing data on that last meeting, showing the flow rate at different points.
Yeah, and that was from, I think that was older data that Christine was showing from measurements that had been taken when they were developing the flow restoration plan for the Allen Brook at multiple points up throughout the watershed, or throughout the main stem and secondary branches rather of the brook. But the USGS has had this monitoring, gauging station at the Route 2A intersection for a long time. But I just can't recall if they restored it to operation or not, because it was shut down in a funding crunch about 10, 15 years ago, maybe something like that. And that program that we were participating in was a Vermont DEC program that took advantage of some laboratory capacity that they had in the state environmental lab. And so the way the program was initially set up was they would award a grant to either towns or watershed groups to collect water quality samples on their particular water body of interest. In our case, it was Allen Brook. And we would work with the state to identify the different parameters that we were interested in as a community, but also that they were interested in for their own water quality measuring purposes. And the idea was it would be a 3-year rotation. So like Williston, for example, would receive the award, such as it was, for 3 years. And so we would get water quality or laboratory services provided by the state for 3 years. And then we would cycle out for a number of years. That never really happened. And I think it's because at that point, the Allen Brook was a very high priority for the state because they were developing the TMDL, or the maximum daily load for the stormwater issues in the brook. And then that program kept growing and growing. There's more and more demand across the state. But also at the same time, or eventually, the capacity of the lab was exceeded, and they weren't able to really support this program and that model anymore, is my understanding. And they may still have it. It was called the La Rosa program, or monitoring program. And then the pandemic hit and everything collapsed. Anyway, they moved the lab from Waterbury down to Randolph, and there was a whole bunch of factors in play that just made it more challenging to run the program. And so I think the last I heard, which was when we did stop the monitoring program in 2020, I believe, maybe it was 2019 was the last time we actually collected water quality samples. The message from the state was, if you would like to keep your program going, you need to pay for the lab samples yourselves. And then they would run them. The challenge, which led us down this whole conversation today, was, as Terry brought up, is the state just provided the laboratory services. They helped us figure out how to collect the samples and provided the sample collection vials and all that stuff. But there's no interpretation of the data. Of the lab results. And so what we were trying to do is get a grant from the state to hire a consultant to take a look at the 12 years or so of data that we had and interpret it, provide just a basic report that we could then provide as a summary of the health of and progress on water quality of Allen Brook.
So that never did happen.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Go ahead, Terry.
I was just asking, that never happened? The results were never put into a report, or?
Not really. I worked with Melinda each year to just summarize the annual results of what happened in the previous year, how many water quality samples were collected. I did some basic trends analysis, but I don't have the time or the capacity to really get into a deep dive of a long-term 12-year analysis of the full data set.
That's what you're right. We were hoping to get a grant for someone to do.
Yes. Yeah. So I guess to wrap this conversation up, I guess, Simon, when did you say that the application deadline is?
February the 8th.
February 8th. Okay, so we've got one meeting or maybe two to talk about it. I guess two probably, right? Yeah. Two. Okay. So Simon, I guess, can you circulate around that the link to that RFP and you know, we can look at it, or I can at least look at it ahead of the next meeting, and we can maybe bat around some ideas for applications or for projects that we could submit, and then maybe if we land on one, maybe we can draft something up for an application.
Yeah. Okay.
How is our next agenda looking? I feel like we've added a couple of things to the next meeting agenda.
So Ethan Tapper is going to come and just speak about Catamount and the forest management project that's going on there. We were going to talk with Gary so that he has a clear steer from the commission on how to sort of proceed on the citizen advisory committee and what's important, and then we can also just talk about watershed grant as well.
Okay. And then we had wasn't there something else we just added to that agenda? Oh, I guess we're talking about the ERF funding too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Reed just asked during that, Reed Willis rather, during that discussion just about in anticipation of continued development in Taff Corners, how can we protect the Allenbrook and wetlands, and how can we motivate businesses and HOAs to use best practices around them, which was a question. So I guess the starting point is that we do establish watershed protection buffers, and for the Allenbrook, they're 150 feet from the high water mark, which helps ensure that any water entering that is not polluted. And I think I'm not really familiar with exactly how the stormwater systems that these developments are required to provide works, but I know they do have to allow for sort of features that clean the water before it's discharged elsewhere.
The Allenbrook was sure running over its banks right around that last big storm, Christmas Eve, I guess, day. That was, or the day before that. That was
quite high.
Oh my! And the current, the rate at which it was flowing was pretty incredible.
I imagine it was. Yeah, I wasn't here to see it, but with all the snow that was on the ground and then all that rain that blew through, it was probably a lot to. Yeah, I can imagine there's a lot of water moving through there. I'll have to look at the lake level, see how much came up. Speaking of Reed Willis, Reed, I don't know if you're on, but it'd be great to hear an update from you on the Winooski Valley Park District as well, or else from Nick at an upcoming meeting.
I'm here. I don't have a whole lot to say, unfortunately.
Well, I didn't mean to put you on the spot right now. Talk with Nick and at an upcoming meeting, either you or Nick can connect in and talk about what the review, the budget presentation that Nick just shared with the select board last night, and talk a bit about some upcoming projects. When was the last time that Nick was in? Maybe it wasn't that long ago.
I think it was last spring, as I recall.
Was it really?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Well, I recall it being when I was very new. So, yeah.
Yeah, you just started, Reed. Yeah, I remember that.
But yes, I'll speak to him about that.
I wonder if it's time to start thinking about, another access to the Jacob Krantz parcel. Because I don't know, it just sounds that Trinity it's kind of in a flux, and who knows when they're going to move ahead with that development, and how tied is the access to that parcel tied to the development. So I don't know if there's another way to, get to that parcel.
Mm.
I know Nick has presented multiple potential access points, pretty thorough review of them. And I know there was a significant priority on the church access compared with the other options, but certainly Reed, that would be something that would be good to understand whether the church property, the delays in the development plans at the church, Baptist church property, how that plays into, does it cause a reprioritization of looking at other access points or not for the Jacobs parcel?
Right. I also recall that I believe the way they planned to do their development was going to be a sort of phased process, and the trail access was in the early part of their development. That was going to be one of the first things that was built out, as opposed to a later part of the development. So I think they had prioritized that probably as a way to please the town. I don't know. Anyway, I'll let Nick know that the town's very interested in the results of his discussion.
And one last comment on this, Eric, is just that I think one of the benefits of hearing from Winooski Valley Park District is to understand what's going on more broadly in the area. What are other towns talking to Winooski Valley Park District about? What other properties are being worked on? Just kind of what's the lay of the land in terms of establishing and maintaining new recreational areas. So it's not always Reed necessarily about Williston and our specific asks and partnerships with them, but it's also nice to know what's happening outside our borders that we may not be hearing about.
Does the town own that piece of land? I mean, does Winooski Valley Park District own that piece now? Oh, it hasn't been transferred yet. Okay.
Not until, yeah, it would be part of the, it would be triggered by moving forward with setting up access and trails and so on. They're not interested in owning it until it's going to become an active park.
Isn't there an easement from another development, Bittersweet maybe, or something like that, or?
Yes, but to get to that easement, you have to go through Trinity Baptist Church or the Global Foundries parcel, I think, where the solar panels are.
Okay, so there's not a development on the other side near the bridge there?
There is.
Near Agway, yeah, or what used to be Agway.
Yeah, that was one of the access points covered in their analysis.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I just think maybe that's, if this is looking to another 5 or 10 years, I know that, a few years back, the folks from Williston were saying, what are we getting from this being part of, the Winooski Valley District? And really wasn't anything. There was nothing in Williston except Jacob Krantz parcel. Okay, I just wondered if there was another easement through there.
So it sounds like we might have some interest in bringing Nick in and to just hear about what the park district is up to in general, and perhaps hear a bit more about potential movement or lack of, I guess, on the Jacob parcel. I don't know. I'd be surprised if we could get him in 2 weeks, but maybe. But that's certainly something we can fit into a future agenda, Simon. And then you also want to talk about, Simon, you want to talk about some other, at a higher level, some other topic areas we wanted to potentially pursue in the upcoming year?
Yeah, so it was really just so we've got a number of things we're doing, and the agendas do fill up from week to week. Is whether the Conservation Commission feels like there's anything they want to prioritise over the next few months. We did a certain amount over the last year, and we're going to have to spend a bit of time on Glazer over the next 6 months. There's also a few other things like preparing for Green Up Day that I know we want to spend a bit of time on, working with No Mo May and Raise the Blade. Gary, Kim and I did submit that tree grant application. So I sort of get the impression that regardless of whether we are successful there, we're probably going to want to try and update the tree survey with some students in April, May. So that's another thing that we were looking to do. We've got the the ERF fund outreach as well. So I guess there's actually quite a lot going on over the next few months, and it's whether there was anything in particular that the Conservation Commission wanted to start thinking about taking forward. You know, we did briefly touch on trails last year, and looking at that maintenance report, and then last week we talked about the Dan Boomhauer letter about trails in general and increased pressure on them, as well as, you know, we have the agritourism piece of work, and then finalising the significant wildlife habitat area.
I guess one idea that came to my mind is something we talked about a while ago, which is around the idea of wetlands consultants and wildlife consultants, and how we currently require applicants to recruit and hire their own consultants when they're asked to develop conduct a wildlife survey or a wetland survey of a property that they're planning to develop or subdivide. And the point of that was is that the best approach from the viewpoint of the town, or would it be better for us to ask the consultant to pay a fee to the town and we recruit and hire a consultant to conduct the survey as our client rather than as the developer's client? And I don't know if there's any precedents for this either in Williston or elsewhere, but I guess that's just a conversation I think that I would like to have. And
I know Public Works charges an engineering fee for someone external to review a site plan or subdivision for sort of all the engineering stuff. And
then Public Works Public Works hires the engineer using the funds provided.
Yeah, so they charge what's called an engineering fee, and then the applicant gives them a check, and then they go and hire a firm who provide them with like a 6-page incomprehensible document that explains everything that's that needs to be changed on their detailed engineering drawings. So there is some precedent for it.
So Public Works hires their own?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I this is all just part of that feeling that we always feel like we get information late in the process, and we don't always know that we're getting consistent feedback in terms of what's included in it and what they're looking for, and whether it's whether the judgment is consistent from one process, one proposal to the next.
Yeah.
Be interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting to know what other towns around us, South Burlington, Shelburne, Charlotte, who they use and what their process is.
Yeah, that would be interesting. something we can definitely look at.
Yeah, Simon, that might be a good question for that group that we were just talking about. What is it? The regional partnership group, the South Chittenden County. Come on, help me out here. Partnership.
Regional Planning
Champlain
Commission.
Valley.
That one.
Valley, yeah.
That has whatever half a
CVR
dozen
something
towns
something.
in this area that meets somewhat regularly.
Yeah.
Is the state doing a little bit more on identifying wetlands in each town? Aren't they doing a little bit more closer look at within each town? Is that maybe something Jens might be involved in?
I think we asked him when he was on, and he said, as far as like landscape level evaluations of or compiling all the, all the different, does the state receive and compile and use all the different wetlands delineations and assessments that are done? And the answer was no. There's nothing happening to pull it all together. It's just each parcel one by one as they are being reviewed. We must be nearing 9 o'clock, Eric.
I think so.
Getting
I think
punchy.
so. Running out of steam here. Well, I think that, Simon, that gives you a little bit to work with for building out some future agendas.
Yeah.
And David, again, thanks for joining us. I'd be happy to set up a separate call with you and maybe with Simon if you'd like to just kind of review the charge of the Conservation Commission and some of the projects that we have been working on and we'll be discussing, to just give you a little bit more of a background to work from.
That'd be great. I'd take you up on that offer for sure.
And there's a ton of information that Melinda and Simon have helped put out on the website. So on some of the primary topics we work on, like conservation prioritization and so on, if you go out and surf the Williston website, you'll find things about desired trail connections that obviously you've already seen the outcomes of those before, but also about our conservation prioritizations for parcels and other topics too, that including the Jacob Krantz parcel has its own page that talks about what it is and when we acquired it and what the plan is with Winooski Valley Park District. So there's a lot of stuff out there.
Yeah, great.
I would think that would be a great idea. I think somebody suggested that because when I came on to the Conservation Commission, I had been, coming to meetings, but didn't really know a lot about it. But I just kind of was there. I just was attending meetings and I really didn't know what to look for, where to go. And somebody suggested, maybe there could be like a welcome package to a new member, because I was kind of lost. I really didn't know. And I think I reached out to Laura and said, well, you were the last member to come on. what did they give you? And basically Laura said nothing either. It was just you show up to the meeting. So it would be nice to have something.
That was my approach. I seeing as I was accepted yesterday evening, right. I could do nothing more than to just show up. But I think all of that sounds great. I would definitely either a tour of that website as resources or a briefing on what has been covered in the past would be great.
There's a lot.
Yeah, Simon, maybe you can point out to David how you find things when you're trying to look up what we've worked on in the past or have ongoing. But there's a tab called Natural Resources on the left, David, on the Williston website, which I think would be the place to start. It's got information about trails, conservation of open space and so on. That has most of it, but there are some unique spots on the website that are not always easy to find.
I can appreciate that. Thanks.
All right, so just close it out here. So Simon, I guess if you can send a poll around to find out if folks or who might be able to join in person at the next meeting, that would be good to know. And then also maybe you can set up find a time for you and David and I to get together to do a welcome and introductory conversation about the Conservation Commission. And I will draft something up about draft an article, start putting an article together to submit to the Observer. I might send them a note and ask them what they would how that would be, what kind of format would be useful for them, if they would prefer it as a letter to the editor or as an actual article in their green living section, and when that might be good to get together good to have them, good for them to have it in hand for publication. And the next meeting we'll look to talk a bit more about the ERF, and I guess we'll maybe hear from Ethan Tapper, and yeah, there's one other thing for next meeting, right?
Talk to Gary about the charge.
Laser. Yep. All right. I think that's it. Anything else?
Declare it adjourned,
Okay.
Eric.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Have a great
Thank
day.
you. Welcome,
Bye, everyone.
David.
Welcome, David. See ya.
Thank you.
Bye.
Nice to meet you all.